Orchard 1. Orchard 1, some changes, which are, we didn't see this one apparently last week. Code style and removing outdated comments. Fixing that registration-based actions should be always accessible. Yes, we saw that. I will check out the dev branch, and on dev branch we merge some PR. Ability to configure field indexing options, the same for content types, but for fields. So you can define store, analyzing, remove HTML for all the fields now for the indexing, fixing the tab gallery. Custom forms module elements with editing capabilities and improved permission handling, so better permission management for custom forms. From Laser. That's the new things. Most work on Orchard 1 will be on a dev branch now. I don't expect we provide much on 110x because we'll ship 111 very soon, and that will be the new small version that we fix. Orchard core. Not that much, but that's good. We'll see. What do we have here? So Alex fixing the Docker images CI, and to do that he has to use a new experimental image that is based on Windows Server 2019, because the .NET Core images now only, the base images for .NET Core only work on Windows Server 2019, and because we are building Docker images also for Orchard based on these, we need the same thing here. It's brand new, and if I go on CI just to check, there is only one caveat right now. So if I go on the CI, which is failing, but that's okay. It's just a functional test that is flaky. If we look for Docker, here we are nothing. This one. Nothing. Confused. This is dev branch. Why isn't it generating the no artifacts? Okay. Oh, this is a PR. Okay, my bad. This is a PR. Okay. This one. Okay. Better. So Docker is there. Okay, you see it's building all the layers, the image, pushing the image, done. So that is good, and all the packages deployed. Good, and you can see it's based on, does it say it? I don't think it says that, which image it's using, it doesn't say. But the change is that now the full build takes 21 minutes because this image has to be started every time because it's an experimental image. And it takes some time just to start the image, not to actually run the CI, but to start the image on Azure. That should be fixed soon. That's one change. And talking about the flaky test, I assume this is the same one. You see one failed. So the setup of the blog from a SAS recipe fails. I don't know why. sometimes. Maybe some timing issue, but it should not be the case. It always works for us. So I don't know. I'll try to repro locally. Hopefully it can repro locally. Where was I? Here. Questions? Good. Fixing data annotations, localization. Very good fix because bad issue. The issue was that people complaining that using the PO file string localizer, they could not localize data annotations. Let me show you. And I will also mention why it matters. So this issue, add data annotation localization, is a call that you do from MVC, from a startup, and the goal is that things like this, when you have a model with some required message or display name property attribute, then this thing will be translated automatically using the string localizer. And in Orchard 1 it didn't work, it never worked, but in Orchard Core it's supposed to work well, at least in .NET Core. In ASP.NET Core it's supposed to work correctly because it's using the correct service for translating, which Orchard implements. But these didn't work correctly in Orchard Core. So the question was, is the issue in ASP.NET or in Orchard? And I found it was in Orchard because while debugging and well, mostly asking the devs what is the expected behavior, we had the bad behavior. As an explanation, you see iString localizer is created by a string localizer factory. And the question is, should a string localizer know about the culture it's supposed to render? Or is it when we call localizer.getString that we should check what is the current culture? In our assumption was that the localizer should be localized for a specific culture because it had a method called withCulture to return a new one for another culture. But actually, it's not. It's when you call getString that it should be localized. So what happened in our case is that we were creating a localizer for the current culture, like English, because it's our default, for instance, on our machines. Then we go on a page for Spanish, and it will still reuse the same localizer. Well, the infrastructure that looks for the attributes will reuse the same localizer because we didn't expect it. Well, we didn't expect it to use the same localizer, so we will return the same localizer. So now we do the culture resolution when the getString is called on the instance. And it worked with the views because the views get a new string localizer instance every time they are rendered, but not when the attributes are evaluated. So it's fixed. So it's important because this package is not just for the Orchard Core framework or the CMS. It's a NuGet package that anyone can use to localize their ASP.NET applications based on PO files. And we support pluralization and PO files and dynamic PO files. So that's important for more than just Orchard Core. Okay, so this is fixed. I'll go back on this one after adding localization file guide. Then Hisham Benateya was asking how to configure the localization files. So I wrote a guide. So I asked Antoine, how do you configure localization files? He gave me a few steps and I wrote the guide here. Let's see that on the guide. Is the best feature we've ever done in Orchard Core. So also reminder that Antoine changed, I assume since Thursday when we talked about it, the localization to just have one version of the documentation. sorry, it changed the documentation, not the localization. It changed documentation just to have one version, so there can't be any misunderstanding about which branch you are targeting. We always show the latest branch, the dev branch, and if we have documentation that only relates to the dev branch, we should make some notes in the documentation to say this won't work with master or the NuGet.org packages, so be careful, it's a preview article or whatever. But for those who didn't see that, we have guides here, the best thing ever, and we add more guides which are small tutorials or bigger ones which are not done. But now we have installing localization files with this, and it tells you how to install a localization file. So downloading the localization file from this folder, it shows you all available ones. And look at the progress from Hishamko because he's working on the Arabic. It was 11%, now it's 41%. Okay, good stuff. So we have these languages. Also, Antoine created the placeholders for all the languages we have in Orchard 1, even if they have not been started. This way people can start their own content. And how to install a French one. So you download this file. It will give you a fr.zip file. This is what it looks like to download the file. You extract the files in this folder. This is what it will look like. Then you configure the supported culture to add the French. Then you enable the localization module, and to test you type culture equals fr, and then you should see some French strings. This is French. This is also French. This is not French, but this is a static text. Okay, so a little guide. And for those who don't know, we have guides also to create a custom menu item type. Sorry, custom menu item entry in the navigation. How to create a CMS from the .NET templates. You just follow it. How to execute some custom code when a tenant is activated. And we'll have more of these as we write them. Okay, small guides for small typical tasks you want to do with Orchard Core or the CMS. So this is that. So whenever someone asks you how do I do that, and you want to answer, it's even better to take the time to write the article so nobody will answer again or will ask again, and people will be happy to find documentation. So updated the badge. Okay. Fix another URI. Fix typos in installing localization files. Thank you, Antoine. Crowding. I want to do ing. Okay, so Antoine is fixing my English. A French fixing another French English. I'm sure there are more mistakes now. Well, there are still mistakes now. This, and I wanted to mention also. Yes, also reminder, let me show you, it happened this morning because Matthias fixed something in the documentation, I think. So if I go to close pull request and I look at small fix on the .NET restore command, you see there is a typo in the documentation, for instance, for the start. If I look at view details here, one check passed, and usually we have the CI building everything and it takes a long time. Now it's proven that any change in documentation won't run any CI, won't block the CI, and the merge will be instantaneously taken by the documentation CI to render it. So there is nothing that can block, like a flaky test or whatever, that can block a documentation change to be merged directly. Okay, we still target the dev branch, but this should be super quick now to do changes on documentation. This one, adding crop for Resize Mode. So Jeff, reading documentation, found that. So first he's changing. No, yeah, this is the PR later. So he's adding to the documentation the fact that we also have the crop property. It was not documented, so we did that. This has been reverted, so I will skip. Small fix on the .NET restore. This is the change I was mentioning from Matthias. Fixing a command line. improve create button on ListPart, another change from Matthias, so that when you just have one content type attached to a ListPart, then instead of showing a drop down, the button will directly have the type you can create. This one fix. Oh, and what I like, I need to show that. What I like with Matthias is pull request is when he does some change on the UI like this, you can be sure that you'll get a nice GIF animated that will show before. You see the create had a drop down. And now the create blog post, just one button, not a drop down, because there is just one type you can create it here. So either you create it or you don't. Click the button. So good improvement. Fix codemirror CSS path. This one was interesting because I double checked. The CSS for codemirror is actually in the script folder because it's under a codemirror subfolder, which contains everything for codemirror. It's not obvious, but I found the issue. If you're using the CDN, you could not see that, but by using the local assets, you can see. Fixing media liquid filter resize URL arguments. So Jeff is using the media resizing a lot, and he saw that from the documentation you can use width, height, and mode in this order, but the code was not getting the mode from the ordered arguments, but only from named arguments. Meaning, if you did call the resize URL, then a number, and a mode, the mode will not be taken into account. Only if you had specified mode, colon, and the value. Now it will also take the value, which is the third parameter, if available, or if not mode defined. That's how it works in Liquid. Revert call, this is the thing I skipped. Updating Fluid because many bugs in Fluid, many. A few. Hopefully the last one, as usual. Issues, closed, issues, test multiple level includes. You could already include multiple levels, but someone reported an issue. I assume the issue was that if you include the same template you are in, there will be a Stack Overflow. So this is fixed. For loop iterating one too many times. If you started from 0, I think, or from 1 instead of 0, then you will have one loop, too many loop. Or if you didn't start from 1, actually, that was the issue. So that's a good thing. Does not process where filter. The filter was created but not registered. Concurrency issue in some cases. You could have collection changed while iterating or stuff like this. This has been fixed. And this was already taken into account earlier. So I made these changes. Well, I pulled the PRs, you see, contributions, and then merged it in Orchard this morning. That's the last change that we made so far. And we have PRs. So Jean-Thierry has started working on a migration to 3.0. There are lots of breaking changes in 3.0 in terms of ASP.NET, not in terms of Orchard Core itself, but just in terms of ASP.NET, in MVC and everywhere else. CS Proj also probably. Nancy we need to drop, so I won't go on this PR, work in progress, and we are not even envisioning right now to use Netcore 3.0 because it's not even go live and it just keeps new breaking changes, so we don't care right now. But Jean-Thierry is free to work on this PR as much as he wants. We have also an updated, where is it? This one I will check, but where is Matthias? Matthias and Jasmine have worked on merging dev onto the attached media field. As a reminder, this is a PR that will merge after beta 3, I assume, not before, too risky. that provides, so from Matthias mostly, that provides a way to define media files that are only visible in the context of the current content item you are editing. Like if you're editing a blog post and it has thumbnails, when you select media, you won't see them in the main media manager. Okay, they are linked only to this content item. That's a new feature, and people love it. They want it, so they will have it. So that's good. And the next step for that is to have media that are visible only by some users. You know, just to group media together. Some people have asked this week and last week about media content items. So as a reminder, in Orchard Core, as opposed to Orchard 1, media are not content items, they are just files with a path. So the media field is just a list of paths to a file that is handled by a media storage. The goal is that so most of the time we don't need a content item for a media. That's the usual usage of a media, is not to have a content item. So it's faster for us to just store a path than to have to load the content item to store the data, okay, to render an image. But we can have media content items by just creating a content type. You can call it image, video, or whatever, and attach a media field to that, and then you have media as content items. And you can have content pickers then on your other content items to select this kind of media and not the raw files. And you can then add all the metadata you want on that. And you can, if you want also to prevent having to load all these content items, which can be reused across every other content items, then you can create a back part that will have this kind of media, that will have not only an image but also metadata for that. And this way there will not be any other database lookup to load a media item. So everything is doable. It's just what you want to do. I have a topic related to that too I want to talk about with you. Questions about that? These are all the changes. Demos, I didn't ask, but I didn't see anything special. So status we did, demos, topics, and I have topics about media. No demos, I assume. I don't have a demo. I didn't do much but fix the localization stuff. Jasmine worked on the media field. I assume you use it, right, Jasmine?
Yes, I'm using it already on my website.
Good. I know also Daniel needed it, but I'm not sure he's using it already. Okay, that's, if you have no question, I will go to topics. So topics, release. So I will most probably push the release button this afternoon. Okay, because if we don't release, we will never release. That's obvious, and I think it's stable enough that all the new bugs we see are not critical, not blocking, and people have tried the dev branch for weeks now without any issue. There was one this morning from Pete Davis, I think, about duplicated SQL queries, but I've never seen that. Jasmine has never seen that, so it should be fine. Everyone who's using the dev branch has never seen that either. Maybe there is a bug, but we'll see. We'll find it and fix it if it's real. But it should not be. Maybe it's just a weird circumstance and then it happened. We'll see. So I will merge to master, which will unblock us to merge all the other PRs on dev branch. It might be hard because there might be some merge conflicts, or it will break some features, but there won't be any code breaking change. So that will be a smooth set of PR merges, and it will free up some time from all the guys who worked on the PRs already. and can work on new PRs or improve their stuff because they don't know if it works, or they don't have feedback, or it's just breaking their merge request every time we do some change on dev, so it will be easier for everyone to move on. Does anyone disagree with releasing? Like big bug or big feature we are missing? There are 2 open things for beta 3 right now, but they are not blocking beta 3 in my opinion. Just inconvenient things. So I'm fine with releasing to master. Also, I'm going on vacation next week, so I won't be able to release next week. It will push it to 2 weeks, so I don't want to push it in 2 weeks, so I'm just merging now. This way we have time to react to any change and let it be. Then media. So I had some. There is a PR right now. Which one is it? Here. We have 2 pages of PRs. It's bad. Okay, not this one. I think that's related to this one. Path-based to map between media and path and URLs. So it's related to that, not maybe that PR, but this PR is related to the subject I want to talk about. So media. Today, when we have a media, let's see. I have to go to code. Media store? What is it called? Media file store. Okay. It's more an asset file store, but media file store. This one has map path to public URL, map public URL to path. It implements iFile store story. So this is iFile store I want to see. Okay, and iFile store, you can get file, get directory, so you can store documents into a file store. Okay, very simple. And then we have a media file store, so I will go back on this one, that can store documents and also map path to public URL and map public URL to path. The idea of that thing is that knowing a path for media like /images / thumbnail.png, knowing that this method will return the public URL we need to render when we render a media, so that this file store can serve the correct media when requested. Okay, so it's a bridge between an HTTP request to the file that is contained by the store. The default one is using the file system implementation, the folder. So it's just saying whenever you want to access a /image /thumbnail.png, it will return /media /image /thumbnail.png. Okay, something like that. And then it's the static file handler which will handle that. And the opposite, when we have a public URL, can you guess which image it represents? Okay. So this is done for a very specific reason, which is that if we have Azure Blob Storage, we want to render not the local path to the image, but the path to Azure Blob Storage. So when we add an image to the Media Manager, it will store the image on Azure Blob Storage, and then, or any other blob storage. And then when we get the path for this media from a content item, we need to find what is the public URL of this media in Azure. So the custom implementation for Azure Blob Storage will return HTTPS azure.com something. Okay, that's how it works. And what I want to do next is to remove this interface, so we don't have to care about where publicly the media is accessible, or something differently than that. The idea being that I don't think we should serve. So we did that for Azure Blob Storage, for the kind of scenario of Azure Blob Storage, but the idea would actually to serve the blob storage from our web server. So when we go in /media/myimage.png, okay, the path is myimage.png. And if it was on blob storage, the public URL will be https azure.com. It's totally not that, but just to give you an idea, my site /myimage.png. Okay, and this is the URL we will render so that the browser will find the image. What I want to do is that instead when this thing is requested, Orchard will download the blob corresponding to that from Azure and either render it directly on the request or save it as a cache locally and serve it for the next request without having to ask for Azure. Okay. In terms of perf, you will say it's stupid because it will be slow. Well, I think it won't be slow, but it opens other possibilities. So why do I want to do that? First, because if we do something like this, let's say I want to do a resize. This won't work because the server on Azure.com doesn't know about image sharp or whatever. So this thing can only be done if we serve the image by ourselves. Okay, so that's first reason, resizing images. To be able to resize images, we need to process them. So we need to load them and to serve them not from a public URL. We could even detect that it's not a local one and then only download it in this case, but I don't think it's necessary. So first, resize images. Then we have CDNs. So content delivery networks are local caches of the thing that we request. So for instance, it should be obvious to everyone. So some people use blob storage because they want CDNs. Okay, because they are like, no, I want my images to be close to people, and that's the benefit of Azure Blob Storage, even if I have only a single instance. But I think I could disagree because we can use CDNs even for our local images. Okay, or we could use CDNs. So the idea would be to use CDNs even for blob storage. So we could say that yes, we have blob storage, but it's just for storage. It's not for serving the images. And by the way, we can make it private completely, so nobody can access our Azure Blob Storage. It's the web service, the web server, Orchard web server, that will download the media, serve it this way, and then if we have a CDN, then the CDN itself is responsible for asking us for the media, which we will download from web storage, so it will be slow the first time, slower the first time, but then every time the users will hit the CDN, then they will get the image from the CDN, not from us. So we won't even serve the image, even less load it from Azure. So what I suggest is, instead of having an interface that will give us a public URL, is that every time we render a media is to have a configuration setting with the public CDN prefix for media items, for media files. Okay, so it will be a configuration where we will define HTTP :/ or no, protocol-less / Azure CDN.com my own site.azurecdn.com. So what you will do is configure Azure CDN to be a CDN on your website, which is mywebsite.com. And whenever we render a media file, we will prefix the URL with that, so that the browser will ask the CDN for the resource, which will itself ask our site for the resource, and then get the blob storage thing. Okay, so it's behind the CDN, so it's cached. And that will also work with images, even if we don't use blob storage, because if we have a local image like this, it will also work. It will cache our images, so it will be better for in every scenario, even in the blob storage case. And we don't have to handle mapping public URL to private URLs because we always get private URL calls. We always serve it, which means they will also be resizable, even with a CDN. Because in the CDN, if we have something like foo.png with resize something, it will with equals 1, 2, 3, it will request that on our server, so we can resize everything. Okay, and I tested it with Azure CDN yesterday, and it's awesome. It works perfectly. It's super fast. It's amazing. And that will work with any CDN. Azure CDN, Akamai, which also works on Azure CDN, Verizon, Cloudflare, anything you can imagine as a CDN. So that was the first thing with that. Also, about CDNs. So I suggest to have a configuration setting with the public CDN prefix for media files. And a trick is that if you really want to use Azure Blob Storage as the CDN and as the source of your images, then put the prefix for the Azure Blob Storage as your CDN provider. So we will never load the blob storage. Okay? That's how you can't say it's a bad idea, because you can still have the behavior of blob storage serving itself the image. You just have to say, this is my CDN, this is Azure Blob Storage for the media files. Because the second step is to have a configuration setting with public CDN for resources, resource manager, like the CSS and the script files, the ones that we serve from our site that we own. So today you know that when we define a resource, we can define the debug version and the minifile version, and also a CDN version. And then we have a setting to say, I want to use a CDN version of my resources instead of the local ones, if they are available. But what I suggest is that we also have a CDN prefix, so that we know we want to serve all the scripts, or there are scripts that we serve and we can't serve it from a CDN directly because they're not available on JS Deliver or Google CDN or Max CDN or whatever, but we have local scripts even for themes, but we want to use a CDN. So in this case, we need to be able to set the CDN prefix for these files, and then they will be also cached by a full CDN, and the site will be much faster. So that's my recommendation, to define two new different configuration settings for CDNs, one for the media files, one for the static resources we support. And this way, we can handle any CDN. And the only thing to do is that when we render the URL, if we render the local version of the URL, then we should check if there is a CDN settings for the resource, and then prefix that with the CDN setting, and that will work. And that this will be 3 lines of code and a half. This will be less code than before, and this will support many scenarios than before. I'm done talking. Did you listen to what I said? What are your opinions? Does it make sense? Do you agree with that or disagree? Beautiful. I knew it. That's fine. You all agree. At least you are hearing me. That's good. Jasmin, does it make sense? Because you know the subject. Did you listen to me?
So how are you going to handle the cache that the image sharp is doing going from there? Yeah.
It's independent from CDN settings. That's a different concern.
Yeah.
Right? But I agree. So you're only concerned with having. So your concern is about, and I know your concern because you asked the questions already. So what Jasmin is mentioning is that if we load the files from blob storage by ourselves now, and we will serve them directly, okay? Or I mentioned we could cache them locally so that the next time we serve them, if we don't have a CDN, we don't pay the price from downloading it again from Azure Blob Storage. Okay, so we'll cache locally, and this is also what Image Sharp is doing for caching the resized images. Jasmin is already worried that the Image Sharp cache might take too much space on the disk if you have lots of images and you just resize them all. So this will be even worse with Azure Blob Storage. So we need to be able to set some limits to the cache if we do that, and that's a different matter than the CDN thing. But I agree, this is related in a way that it might incur some disk usage. So yes, we need to so take into account, so purge image sharp cache automatically with some thresholds. Okay. And also if we cache Azure, well, if we cache media items, then same thing, purge. Okay, so yes, I agree, we need to think about it. I don't think this will be an issue for most cases, for the same reason that image sharp is not an issue right now, but we need to be able to take that into account, to define the limit of that. And that's doable because whenever we store media, we can store how much data we already stored, like in a file that is also on the file system, so that it's consistent with what we have on the file system. And when we see a threshold, we can purge the cache with whatever logic we want. First in, first out, or just purge everything and done. Start from beginning. I don't know, things like this. There are many ways to do that. So that's your. I assume that's your only concern, to be able to do that. If we decide to cache the Azure images, we could also have a mode where we don't want to enable this caching and just download the stream in memory and then stream it directly to the response from Azure to the response, and not pass by the disk. Even more if you know that you have a CDN, because then you don't need to store it locally on the machine, because the CDN will always handle the cache for us.
Yeah, this is where I was concerned, because we're caching locally on the website on the Orchard part, and we already have a cache on the Azure Blob Storage, which is naturally cached. Mm-hmm. And
so as I said, if you want to do the setting that you can define your CDN setting to be Azure, so it will never go, it will never be loaded by Orchard.
Yeah, yeah.
That will solve your issue.
Yeah, this looks fine to me.
I tried the Azure CDN. The experience is amazing. You just go on the Azure portal, you enable Azure CDN, you point to your Azure website, and that's it. It gives you a domain from the Azure CDN. Then you change your own domain CNAME to point to the Azure CDN domain that you have with your website, and it takes 5 seconds. And you have your own domain to resolve to their CDN. And then you check one box to have HTTPS. And because you already define your CNAME, it will say, okay, it's valid. You own the domain. You proved it. So they just get a certificate from DigiCert for free because it's using SNI, and then it just works. So I tried that on my, I have an old blog I haven't updated for 5 years, .com, and this is still using Orchard 1. So I tried to create this thing, sebastianrost.com .azure websites using Orchard Core. Okay, so I created a website. Okay, just the sample recipe for a blog. This is sebastian.azurewebsite.net, and it's hosted on East Coast. I am on West Coast, so if I look at the network, it takes 100 milliseconds to render the page, plus then the static files, okay, which are either on CDN or loaded by Orchard Core. But 100 milliseconds to load from East Coast to West Coast. I assume that's about the latency from East Coast to West Coast, but that's around that. So what I did, I enabled the CDN, and I mapped this website to cdn.sebastianrost.com. Again, 5 clicks, and it was done. You see, the first time it was slower. Now if I hit F5, and you can try it, I assume, cdn.sebastian.com. So this is the same site as the Azure website, but on the CDN. If I hit F5, now it's taking 19 milliseconds. On my desktop, it was taking 5 milliseconds. I don't know. Lower now. Kind of, or maybe this is the Chrome debugger that does. I don't know. It was the same thing. But look, I can click, and it's super fast. Everything else is cached because that's the settings from our static files, and but that's served from the CDN. And here it's serving also. I configure it to serve the full site just as an experiment. But imagine that this domain could just be static.sebastian.com just to serve the static assets, because this is what we will provide as the CDN configuration in the new settings I'm suggesting, so that when you go on the real domain, only the assets we want, media and or resources, and I suggest both, will be handled by the CDN. Then you might think about the cost of that thing, and it's super cheap. So from memory, I think it's for the Microsoft CDN thing, the default provider, I think it's 13 cents per gigabyte of data of egress. So every time a gigabyte of data is downloaded from a CDN, at least for the US region, it will be 13 cents. So that should be super cheap, even for a medium-sized site. It should just be a few bucks per month to host that, and you get the perf of a CDN wherever you are. So I think that's a good deal. And you can use any CDN you want, okay, even free ones that you can find on the internet. So don't be shy about that. Cool.
Yeah, and I think this is the part where, for me, I have a lot of images that and I don't want to change all the time my Azure plan just because my hosting is not having enough space, and the CDN is more elastic for the size of disk space. You can just let it go and pay what you have to pay about it.
So you're saying that it's good to be able to handle CDNs this way?
Yeah.
And to offload that on the CDN?
Yeah, because your application should be hosted on Azure, but everything that is assets should be...
No, well, you can mix and match everything you want. You can host it outside of Azure and use Azure CDN, or you can host it in Azure and use an external CDN. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, just having a blob storage for having your assets inside Azure. But yeah, you separate both of them.
So that's the ID, and that will be after beta 3, but that shouldn't be hard to implement. Maybe someone will do it before I do. I wish. It should not be hard. We'll tell it to Jean-Thierry. Maybe he wants to do that. Okay, if you don't have any more feedback, that will be the end of the meeting. Any other questions? Comments? Ready for releasing to master, a new beta 3, testing everything, a few blog posts to announce it. Jean-Philippe is typing. Yes, but we'll see it offline. Nothing to do with we still don't know exactly what the issue is and how to fix it. But there are lots of issues. That's fine. That's not blocking beta 3. We can fix it on their branch still. Okay, cool. Thanks everyone. See you on Thursday. No meeting next Tuesday or next Thursday unless someone opens the meeting, which I won't be able to because I will be on vacation. So I will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.